My big question to you is actually this. Can I know I can change all of the things we changed on the Land Cruiser, all the rubber bits, all the bushes, all the oil seals, the wheel bearings, pinion oil seals, all the fuel hoses, anything that's a bit rubber, out it comes, new one goes in. I know all that stuff, okay? And I did it on my vehicle. I virtually rebuilt the whole thing, but the gearbox has not been taken apart. Can I trust that gearbox? It's never been opened up. I'm Andrew St Pierre White. Join me as I share my passion for building four-wheel drive trucks and travelling to the remotest parts of the world. A week ago, I bought blind a 1976 Range Rover Classic, and it's in a city 3,450 kilometers from my home. My challenge now is to get it in a roadworthy condition and licensed, and then drive it home. But the problem is that this is a 45-year-old car built by British Leyland. I'm going to need some help, and of course, Paul Marsh to the rescue.
Well, it hasn't got high mileage on it, and it does depend on how someone drove it. And I think, quite honestly, when you go and drive the car, you're going to feel the gearbox. The gearbox doesn't just suddenly break on you, it's going to give you some warning. And I think I would put new oil in if it hasn't had already. And when you drain the old oil out, have a look at that and just see if that gives you any telltale signs of anything that might be, giving a problem or showing signs of wear, any little small particles in the oil. It's always a good thing, when you're doing some work on a vehicle. I always feel when you pull it apart is as important as putting the new parts on, because you really want to make sure that you understand what caused and what is the wear and what do you then need to do. So you understand sort of the big picture. It's telling you, it's like, going to the doctor and your car can't speak for itself, but the vets, the veterinary people who do animal veterinary, they're probably the best. Animals don't talk, but they've got to actually look for symptoms and things, and the same with the vehicle. So do that, and the more you look at the car and spend time with it before you actually drive the vehicle, the more you're actually going to get a very good feel for what needs doing, what you should fix up. I mean, you're talking about getting this car on the road to drive home. That's really what you're looking at. Yeah, I think if the things that probably would look at that haven't been used for a long time, brakes are always an issue because the brake seals sit for years and then you don't know the condition of the brake fluid. So those are the things I would probably be most mindful of. And normally what will happen is it'll start leaking. Like a clutch slave cylinder, that takes a lot of wear. That's something I would probably look at saying, put a new one on before you leave, because it's not a big part, but it just depends on how much work you want to do. It's more difficult if you don't, in fact, you don't really want to take the gearbox out if you don't have to. So
this is my thing.
That's the thing.
I can do a lot of the other work. But then when we step to take out the gearbox, then it's a case of, do we strip out the gearbox and rebuild the gearbox? That's a big thing on its own. And that's the big, of all of it, that's I'm most scared of. Because, yes, we'll pressure test the cooling system, and the electric has still got the original get home before dark alternator, and I might change that up. But the thing is that the gearbox is the one thing that I might not be able to do.
I would look at it and say to yourself, you want to actually just go through the vehicle to make it safe. If something goes wrong en route and it lets you down, well, as long as it's not a safety issue. So I suppose the biggest thing for me would be the brakes. And then try and find out in the history, how often have they changed the brake fluid? Maybe do a small drive with the vehicle that you can actually, brakes, if a brake seal is going to fail, it's probably going to fail fairly soon, because normally it's a bit of rust that sits inside the brake system. Brake fluid absorbs moisture over time, and that's why you should renew your brake fluid. And if a car's been standing for a long time, sometimes there's a bit of rust that builds up on the one side of the seal, and then you use the brake and it goes past that bit of rust.
And now the seal's
so it's going to happen. It's going to happen fairly soon, of you driving the car. So I'd be inclined to go through the car and make sure the brakes are good, test wheel bearings. That's the big thing. Look at hoses, look at fuel hoses, fuel filters. Fuel's another thing in the tank. The tank's probably also stood, and you don't know what's going to come out of the tank. So that's worth looking at, and you know, I'd be carrying a good few fuel filters, because I think if you're going to have any bad stuff in the tank, any sediment or anything that's sitting in the tank, it's going to tell you within a short time that, hey, there's stuff in the tank and it's actually coming through to the filters. So I think it's more do what you have to do, but I would do a good small test trip before you leave where you're picking the vehicle up, you know, and go through, change oils, because that oils cost nothing to change.
I'm actually want to park it and get into a workshop and get some guys who understand Land Rovers well and actually go through all of the important bits, because the vehicle hasn't actually driven a very small mileage in the last 10 years, very small, you know, not even 1,000 kilometers. It's hardly driven in the last 10 years.
But the engine, you said to me, the engine's recently been rebuilt. When you say recently, how soon?
I think within the last year. I will find out, but it was very recent, and I didn't pay attention, but it was very recent. And the engine, he sent me a video, and the engine, and he revved it with a camera on the exhaust, and it's smooth. It doesn't even have a tappet tick. A V8, a 3.5 V8 without a tappet tick. That's impressive. It doesn't.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
that's
so
brilliant. Now look, you know, and you, how much mileage has he driven on the engine?
On this engine, hardly anything.
Okay, so it's really important, you know, when you rebuild a new engine, the big thing we always say to people, you've got to run the engine in. Now, find out what oil he's put in. Normally people will run the engine in with a running in oil, and then they'll drain that after about 1,000 kilometers, depending on the engineering and what their preferences are. And then you'll check the whole engine over. You know, they often want to retorque cylinder heads, and they want to go through and just make sure that it's in really good condition. So when you think of something that's come apart, I always say, before you drive it, go around every hose clamp and check it's tight. Because if the water hose comes off, there's your engine gone. And you won't, you know. So go through and just say, let me methodically check every water hose clamp is tight. Let me check that it's got antifreeze in, run the engine, find out what oil went into it, and how long, what their running and procedures that they'd like you to follow. And then make sure that you try and do a good couple of 100 kilometers before you leave and head out of the town, because anything that's going to sort of give a problem normally throws its head up within the first 500 kilometers. So for me, the most critical stage of any major rebuild is the first 500 kilometers to make sure you pick up any potential problems.
Okay.
That you're not down the road and you make a phone call and say, well, the thermostat didn't work and my engine's overheated. That will be such a shame. So
it's such a small thing.
Yeah, it's a small thing,
big
but
consequences.
Yeah, paying really clear attention to, you know, and speak to the guys who built the engine, find out what they changed, what they didn't change. Because it's the one time to really understand when the engine was rebuilt, was it rebored, bearings, was the crank ground? Just so you've got a good history for yourself, really, to know what's been done to the engine. And then I think, you know, the big thing always on a new build and stuff is leaks. So you want to check that you can mitigate any form of leaking. Do a nice little small test trip. And for me, it would be that, and it would be the brakes, you know. I'm quite sure if the gearbox drives smoothly, you're not going to have a problem. If it's got oil in it and it doesn't leak.
Apparently it does. That's what I'm told. I'm told it's smooth, all the gears clunk in nicely. I'm told it absolutely works.
I don't think you'll have an issue. You know, yes, the boxes were a little bit temperamental at times, but, you know, driving that box with mechanical sympathy,
yeah.
And you're going to drive this gently. I know you're going to love this car. So I don't doubt that it's probably in the best hands it could be, because this has been your passion to own one of these. Probably since on all the trips we've been on, you've spoken about a Range Rover. We've talked about stories about Range Rovers.
Oh, what a day, boy, what a day. This is just fantastic.
Someone once said to me when I was in England and I had my business there, which was Land Rover based actually, and then Land Cruisers to follow on. They said, if you cut Paul in half, half's Land Cruiser and half's Land Rover. And I think for you it's been Range Rover and obviously Land Cruiser. But that passion for the Range Rover has been that dream to own one of these. I'm so excited for you because, you know, nothing like achieving and realizing a dream can actually bring so much joy to someone.
So if I sent you a ticket, you would come, yes?
I think I'd be on the next plane.
I think so too.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately,
wow,
that can't happen. But I am going to get more of your advice on the as we go. So I'd like to have. I'm going to kind of. I'll have you with me as I'm driving along, and I'll try and tap into your brain when something starts making strange noises, and I will always think, okay, what would Paul do now?
Well, look, you know what? I think we've got so much good advice on hand here, and certainly, I've got good experience, and I think there's people I know in the UK who've got a fantastic experience. So I don't think we're short on getting any help we need with this vehicle, and certainly, I'm not shy for us to put our hands up and ask people we know. I have some very good contacts there. But I think the big thing is you've got great support behind you. You've got a big parts company who's prepared to send you bits you need. I think the big thing is to identify what do you really need to change to do this trip. And it's not a long trip, 3,500 kilometers or miles?
Kilometers, 3,450.
Yeah, so it's not a massive trip. It's actually a really nice trip to run the engine in. That's what it's
is that the way you see it, even though the car is 45 years old, that it's actually not very far, and it's actually not... I'm thinking this is a huge deal for such an old car.
It's not. And I say that because I've done classic car rallies around the world with much older classic cars in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And these old cars, when they get put together and we drive them, we drove vehicles from London to Sydney. And in some of these old trips that we've done, these cars, they were built for roads. They were built to drive on these things. They weren't designed to go very fast. You can get good speed out the Range Rover, but it's not about speed. And as I say, when I'm traveling and when you're traveling, I'm quite sure, my comfortable speed is, it's around 100 kilometers an hour. Maybe even less if I'm interested in the scenery. Because I just want to enjoy it. So, you're looking, this vehicle is just going to love the open road. It's going to love the engine to stretch itself, run itself in. You're going to be able to stop every now and then, look at it, check it, make sure it's all okay. It's going to be a unique trip for you to take a vehicle like this on an expedition trip. I'm not sure if you're taking it across some hectic...
No.
Yeah? Okay.
I'm not that stupid.
So we haven't planned the Canning stock route with it then?
No, we won't be doing Canning stock route in it, I can tell you that now.
That would do it, no problem. But I think the big thing is, you want to get it back home. Now, I'm more interested. Tell me about what you're going to do with this vehicle once it gets home.
So again, chatting to the museum, we were chatting about it and saying, well, should we restore it? And if we do, how should we do that? And it was very kind of loose, but it would be a pity not to restore it because it's so original. So I can't promise anything at this moment. My immediate challenge is to get it to my home in one piece. And then I want to make it reliable so I can use it. I actually want to use it. I don't want to just park it and it be a hanger queen. I wanted to actually use it. To buy a Range Rover now, a classic, really, you don't buy it to drive. You really don't buy it to use. You buy it as a thing of beauty. It's the kind of thing that you would want to park in, just off the dining room. So, having people over for dinner, you could, if the conversation got boring, you could, look out your Range Rover, and that's what I would buy one of these for. Then I'll give it a coat of paint, and then I'll do some of the restoration work piecemeal. But I don't know at this point. It's not a priority at this point.
It's going to be really interesting to take this vehicle and do some lovely trips with it. You don't have to bolt anything to it. You just have to use it and allow it to do its thing. It's a very capable vehicle, and to put some gear in the back and head off and just take it out into the bush and let it go and be in the bush. It does, tar road driving, it can do that any day. But get it out into the bush, take it over the terrain it was designed for. It's an incredible suspension. And the motor's beautiful, that purring V8 when you're driving through, it's music to many people's ears who are really passionate about these vehicles. So, it's going to be amazing. And you're going to keep it as original as possible, I'm hoping, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, the big question, Andrew, is you've got one big garage. You've got an aeroplane, you're going to have another vehicle, and which part of the house is Gwen giving you to put the vehicle? Or haven't we broached that subject yet?
It's a problem.
That's that problem.
It was what I was actually thinking of in the middle of the night, thinking how I've done all this, and where am I going to put it? I don't know. I actually don't know.
I think you're going to need to find yourself somewhere close by that you can, someone who's got extra space, a nice, like a small industrial unit that you've got that you can work in it. That's what I would look at. It's going to be a shame. You wouldn't want to leave it outside, and I know you won't. And you don't want to put it under cover. Gwen's not going to let you build another garage in the yard. Definitely not. So yeah, and I know the aeroplane's another part of your.
So yes, and people will be wondering what's happening with the aeroplane. The aeroplane project is absolutely on track. I just have to sell the assets of the camper and the Land Cruiser before I can order it, and that's in the process of happening. So that is definitely happening. That nothing changes. So
you've actually got yourself pretty full with projects now. I mean, you've got a Range Rover to build, you've got an aeroplane, a Range Rover to restore, and an aeroplane to build.
Yes, and a new troop carrier arriving in a month and a half. You know, I realized the other day that I will have, when this arrives home, I will have my two absolute favorite four-wheel drives, and I will own them both. A classic Range Rover and a V8 troop carrier.
Okay, so here's the deal. You need to hang on to these two now.
I think I will. I will. I honestly will. I want to. I almost feel as though I need to have more of an emotional attachment to my vehicle, and I didn't really have it with the camper Tourer. It was just a machine to me. But my green troop carrier that you and I did canning stock on, I did have seller's remorse when I sold that.
Yeah, no, listen, that I must say, your South African one was good.
Yes.
Your green one that you had was, I think if it was a vehicle that I've known you with, that was probably the one vehicle I think you really regretted selling, because it really did serve you well. I mean, the fun we had driving it on Canning Stock Route was just amazing. I mean, I've got very fond memories of that vehicle. In fact, I've got a picture up here with me sitting on the bull bar on it in my office. And it's just a great memory for me too, because it's one of the vehicles that I'm very passionate about building, and we build a lot of troopies. And of course now in South Africa we're actually able to, you can place a special order to get one.
I know.
But you know,
that's my next car.
Your next car, right?
South African troop carrier.
These two vehicles, I think, are going to be something where you're going to really make something out of them. But the aeroplane behind the troopy, out into the remote places, filming from the air.
Yeah.
How's that for your next trip?
Yeah. We just have to get rid of this COVID nonsense, and then once that's past us and life is back to reasonable normality, we will be able to do that. Because one of the biggest single logistic problems that I have is getting from here to Victoria and then driving it here without having to go through quarantine. And it is a major logistical challenge. It's going to be part of the story.
Yeah, which is great. And remember when we drove the one Botswana trip together and we came back, and I've got a very fond memory of us coming into Macalister. And where we went? We went to the aircraft, and we got into your old Shimango.
Yeah.
Your airplane.
Yeah.
And you took me flying, and
yeah.
You know my passion for flying.
Yeah.
And it just remember that getting in and flying within that plane. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I think there's a lot in what we share because we have similar passions, but one of my passions for flying is big. I fly paramotors and paragliders. But getting in that aircraft with you and just thinking, that's your happy place.
Yeah, it is actually. It is actually my happy place. It is. Yeah.
So good to see you so happy.
Thank you.
Dream happiness.
Thank you.
Childhood dream that's come true.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
Thanks.
grateful for all the support you got, because I think people see value in the support, and very deservedly so. You've given many years to overlanding, as many of us have. And there's some great people, but you really have made it your life's passion. And I think it's lovely when you get recognized for the work you put out. So well done.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe and click the notifications bell so you don't miss our weekly videos.